I think Bill had about a dozen apples separating his neighbors on one side of his property in Fremont, and I think he had well over 50 different varieties grafted on. So he had everything from the Gravensteins to the Fujis to the late season ones, like maybe a Granny Smith or something. So he'd span it from June to December or something like that. So he just would be picking apples for half the year. And it was a hedge, and I'd never seen apples as productive. They just were solid apples, waist high to maybe 12, he kept them pretty small, 12, 15 feet. He's trying them out in Hawaii, and so it looks like you have a baby one here and then a couple-year-old one, maybe.
Yeah, I love apples so much, despite the fact that a tropical environment is not really a suitable location for growing them. I have been known as the guy who just try and tell me it won't grow there. I'll try it. Sometimes I'll do it. In this case, we've been successful. This is a Dorset Golden apple. It originates in the Bahamas. So this is about as low chill as an apple variety gets. The tree is now about 2.5 years old, I believe. From a bare root tree. It was grown by L.E. Cook in California. It was a bare root tree shipped over here, and I bought it from one of the local nurseries. The Dorset Golden is a good choice if you're going to attempt to try to grow an apple in Hawaii, and we have succeeded getting apples off of this in the first 2 years the tree was in the ground, which is not bad, okay, especially for an apple so far out of place. There are problems with it. As you can see up here, we've got apples on it. Well, it's November, and the reason there are apples in there is because sometimes the tree doesn't know whether it's spring or fall. I've watched this tree bloom twice a year, and usually we can manage to pick fruit off it twice a year. Now, whether it's going to exhaust itself and drop dead eventually because of that, I don't know. But in the meantime, we get 2 crops of apples a year. One of them ripens during midsummer, one of them ripens at the end of winter, going back to spring. Pretty wild, huh? This is the big tree, the oldest one, right over here. That Weasley little guy right there is a Anna. Anna is a Los Angeles apple. Again, another one with below 200-hour chilling. The tree hasn't taken off as rapidly as Dorset. It was only planted last winter. Hadn't been on a lot of growth. Some, we're okay with it. That one, apparently, though, knows how to go dormant. It's dropped most of the foliage, and it's going to sleep for the winter. The Dorset Golden has a problem with figuring out dormancy. You'll also notice here a little surprise. At the bottom, there is a tomato. The tomatoes, despite the fact this is one of the easiest crops to raise on the mainland, this is a challenge in Hawaii. If you can raise a good crop of tomatoes out in the open ground around here under the rain, you're a winner, I'll tell you. You get the gold star as a gardener, because there are 250 different tomato diseases, and at least half of them will attack your vines here. Also, the nematodes will attack the roots. And even if the vine doesn't succumb to funguses and bacterial infections, it will eventually decline due to root knot nematode. Now, this happens to be Ace 55, and I didn't plant it. There was a tomato plant out here sometime last year, and this is one of the rotten fruit that came up. Solavino as its own, and it is doing pretty well. But looking at it, what I see down here is there's too many fruit together in a cluster for that to actually be Ace anymore. I have a feeling Ace cross-pollinated with a cherry tomato. That's what this looks like. And so we have a little hybrid tomato here. Who knows what's going to happen? But it definitely has the vigor. There's not even a single bacterial spot on it. Now, I cannot explain that. I do not know why. But I can tell you one thing. If that survives, I'm going to take seeds from it. So here's a jackfruit. Jackfruit is one of the perfect permaculture crops for the tropics. The tree will bear fruit within 3 to 4 years. The fruit is edible as a vegetable. You can stir fry it for a curry or some such thing. The fruit itself is the flavor of juicy fruit gum, so all Americans actually probably know what this thing tastes like. Mr. Wrigley was so impressed he had to make juicy fruit based on this. At one time, juicy fruit had original jackfruit flavor. Now it's an artificial. But it has a decent tasting fruit. It's a huge fruit, more than a family size. These things are big enough for a neighborhood, so it feeds a lot. This is a real food store. The seeds are large, kind of almond-sized, and the seeds can be roasted and eaten like nuts. So you have fat and protein in an edible nut. You'll have a delicious fruit that's large enough for the whole neighborhood. And you also have a vegetable, and it all happens in 3 to 4 years from a seed.
Bill, how come your cabbage will never die? It looks like it's many years old.
You got it, man.
Dr. Seuss cabbage.
I know. This cabbage has really been quite an educational experience for us here. Not only is the cabbage was planted on the low end of the garden, and viewers will know that last winter this all went underwater here. And well, we did find out that cabbage tolerates being flooded. That's good news. And so we did pull crops from it. But what happens is, because of the day lengths in Hawaii, cabbages don't know what time of year it is, and they never know when to bloom. Similar problem to the apple tree. Mm-hmm. And so what happens is, you cut the big head when it comes, and then maybe 3 small heads come. You cut those, more heads come. They keep getting smaller till they're about the size of Brussels sprouts. But because the plant can't flower, in California we could usually cut a crop or 2 off a cabbage stump usually. But then the plant would hit spring, and boom, flowers that come up, it's all over. You know, you can't do anymore. They can't flower here. Producing cabbage seed in Hawaii would be nearly impossible on most varieties. And so they just get uglier and uglier and uglier, and the slugs chew them to the ground. And so, because of the flooding over here, and because of adaptation, now, don't get me wrong, cabbage is an outstanding crop in Hawaii. This is a really, really good crop here. I did not expect that. That wasn't, really, I thought, in the cards. I know they grow cabbage at high elevation here and do well with it. Most of it comes from like Waimea, for instance. They grow it up by Volcano and so on. But we're at 1,600 feet, and even at 1,600 feet on the wet side, cabbage grows. I managed probably, I think it was a good 4 cuttings off these before they finally went to poo. But over here you can see where I am switching from cabbages into taro. This region floods. Taro loves water, and so taro is just happy as a clam down here. You can see how beautiful the taros are. Here's a good case where, like right over here on those trellises, I had snap beans, the French Vortex. Oh man, nematodes ate Vortex, funguses ate it, I don't know how many other things attacked it. I got crops, but they weren't what I would have expected or knew from other locations. So instead, I put Chinese yard-long beans up those. Oh my God, unstoppable. Massive bushels of production. Now, the yard-long bean is not as good as the Vortex. And so I wasn't so happy with the produce, but the difference between one bean from Asia and one bean from France and how different they did here, the yard-long grows so well, I've started using it as cover crop manure for, it works well. The taro, I'm slowly working my way into seeing this as food. Like most mainlanders here in Hawaii, poi is similar to wallpaper paste in our vernacular, And so it wasn't my favorite food, although I found that poi makes a wonderful pancake and an outstanding waffle. So I have found applications, and the taro itself as a chip, like a potato chip, not bad. People cook it. I like the leaf to wrap food in and make lau. And so little by little, I'm gradually adapting my palate to crops that thrive in this area. And I am actually kind of sort of forgetting about some of the ones I used to raise.
Phil, looks like you have grapes here. I would not have thought that would be a Hawaiian crop, being a Mediterranean plant.
It's true. It's true. Or a Native American plant or wherever. Grapes came from a few different areas. But yeah, I know. There are surprises, as I say. Find I can grow an apple, and here we go. We can grow a grape. Yeah, so these are grapes. It's true. And so yes, grapes do grow in Hawaii. I wouldn't have bet on it. There is commercial grape production here on the island, but it's at about 4,000 feet, which we're not. And it's up the road here in Volcano. There's a winery using a New York grape called the Symphony that's producing some pretty decent wine. He does a good job up there. And So the grapes can be grown here, but mostly at elevation. These, I actually found them at about 50 to 100 foot above sea level in Hilo. Kind of a funny story. There are people who cringe when they hear me say that all great gardeners and horticulturalists are great thieves. There's a long story on that, and one of these days we're going to do a video about thieving in the garden. But the truth of the matter is that almost everybody I know who is deep in this business, when they see a plant, they'll snitch it. I've heard them smuggling stuff. I mean, some of the major nurseries in the United States have smuggled things out of South Africa and so on. This happens, all right? Horticulturalists are all thieves, you know, in the sense that I think we all believe that a plant belongs to the earth, not to a person. And so when we take a piece of a plant or a seed, all we're doing is spreading it across the planet. It's not really a crime, but hey, you know, we got ownership. So anyhow, this was a snitch. The first time I came here to Hawaii, I found these growing in Hilo on a guy's fence at around 50 to 100 foot above sea level, and they had trusses of fruit hanging all over them. I was astounded. I said, how can you do that? Years later, when we built the house, I went back and I snitched 2 cuttings. I went walking by the fence and I went click, click, and pulled them off, stuck them in my pocket, and some old guy in the kitchen turned to me and went, thief! I got caught. I just kept walking. So here they are. These are grapes. They grow here in Mountain View. They grow in Hilo. So far, they've grown everywhere we planted them on the island. I think it is an American type. I think. The leaves look American. It's a slip skin grape with a seed. It looks a lot like a Concord, but it's a little more red and it doesn't have as much foxiness to it. So I'm a little uncertain as to what its variety is, but another surprise. Grapes grow here, you know. Here's another one right here. This one is Triple Crown Blackberry. And now, we had been raising Natchez here. Okay, so if there's anybody out there on the island who needs blackberries, you're going to want to stop by here because look at the size of these, okay? This is Natchez. This is a blackberry, a thornless type, trailing blackberry. It was bred by the University of Arkansas. It's relatively low chill, and this plant will fruit like crazy here in our environment. And it's thornless, so it's a nice thing.
Does it ever die back with this climate?
Yeah. Blackberries are going to go through their cycle no matter what. Yeah, the stalks that have fruited die. New stalks growing at the same time will come to flower and fruit before dying. Okay, so it does the normal cycle. The only thing here that's odd is there doesn't really seem to be a real tight window on when it flowers. You know, blackberries will flower multiple times a year here and produce multiple crops. Other than that, the right type grows really well here. So, weird flowering time is about the only issue with these. They grow good, but I don't think Natchez is that good of a blackberry personally. It's big, you know, it looks nice and all that, but it's kind of tart unless it's really, really ripe. This is not a blackberry for out of hand. Great for a pie, great for a jam, jelly. Not so good for eating fresh. On the other hand, recently we brought Triple Crown in. Triple Crown is one of my favorite thornless blackberries on earth. This is an upright, not a trailing type, and I'm hoping that it's going to perform here for me the same way it did in California. That's new, we'll find out. So far I've got a large mother plant in the garden. Looks pretty good, so we're hoping by next spring I'll have blackberries coming on it. This type, the fruit is incredibly sweet, and it's easy to pick. They're really large. And even when they're still really shiny and firm, they still come right off and are sweet.
So Bill, what's this polyculture here? So you have a nice coffee and then you got some orchids growing on it, but I don't think they're just a regular orchid.
Yeah. You know, things grow on things around here. It's very common that even in nature, you go out, walk around the neighborhoods even, and you're going to find trees growing on tree limbs in this environment. It's nuts, but ferns grow on trees, orchids grow on trees. This is vanilla. Okay, so what we're looking at here is the orchid that we get vanilla from. These are vanilla beans right here in a clump. So yeah, right here we got vanilla beans. Now the vanilla orchid originates in Mexico and Central America, so we've got another crop that's kind of from similar places of papayas and dragon fruits and so on. Again, thrives here. Same with cacao. Cacao thrives. It comes from that general area of the world. The vanilla orchid is a huge growing orchid. It will put on maybe up to 6 foot of growth in 6 months. Wow. It can, yeah. It'll really go to town if it's a happy orchid. They're epiphytes. They don't actually need soil. There is no orchid root down here that's actually at the ground. A few have come down from the tree like this and are touching the earth. But vast majority of the roots are actually up here, spreading throughout the tree, all over the coffee. So we're using the coffee as support to hold an orchid. This works to an extent. We've got a prune coffee. It causes a problem in the long run, trying to grow orchids like this. Tom Sharkey in Hilo was using orchids on cacao. That was interesting, and I didn't have enough cacao around, so we tried coffee. Anyway, the problem we have with the orchids here is that the flowering season, these flowers cannot be pollinated by any creature. The flowers have to be pollinated by hand. There's only one bee in the world that's small enough to get in this flower, and it lives in Mexico, and we don't have them here. And nobody anywhere else on the planet that raises vanilla has the bee. So all vanilla is pollinated by hand, by people. Ellen is the vanilla pollinator here, and she does okay. She gets some beans. I have a weird crop coming of flowers right here off my finger. We've been losing a lot of these. It's weird because this is November. Ordinarily this orchid blooms in May. I don't know why it's blooming again in November. If they do that, that's great. That means we get 2 crops a year. Hawaii is very difficult to predict sometimes, plant bloom seasons. It can be rough.